Hi, I'm Johannes Czernin. I have the pleasure today to talk with Dr. Anna Karmann. She is an MD PhD and a trained radiologist, but had a very interesting career thus far, and with many, many different stops and fascinating endeavors. And I'm very happy to have you here and talk to you. And one of the reasons why we are doing this is to teach the next generation what is interesting, what is fascinating, what can be done, how can one embark on a really interesting career.
Thank you, Johannes, for having me.
So maybe I want to start out by asking you, how did you begin? Where did you get your MD and your PhD degree? And uh, and even before that, what did you do before you embarked on your career as a scientist and a physician?
Yeah. My life actually, and hence also my career, started in Germany. So I did my MD in Germany, and then my training as an interventional radiologist and diagnostic radiologist in the Netherlands. But also embarked on several stops, including China. Learned traditional Chinese medicine. Went into an internship in politics. So I was always curious. I think that's probably what shapes me, and potentially also brought me to medicine in general. I think it fit my curious um, uh, um, character in a way, learning as much as I can at that stage what interested me the most, which was medicine and how to make patients better.
So when you uh, were done with med school in Aachen, then you trained in radiology and you were board certified in radiology, focused on interventional radiology. And did you do your PhD afterwards or kind of in parallel, or how did that go?
It started in parallel, yes. It started in parallel in a project that became so successful that my supervisor suggested that I do this as part of a formal PhD program. It started as a research program and then turned into a formal PhD program. So I closed the PhD after my board certification, but it started in a parallel endeavor. It was quite intense at times. I didn't reduce my time during residency, but I was passionate about it and excited about it, and that it didn't drain me, it energized me, even doing two things technically at the same time.
And then you made the jump to the United States. You ended up at Stanford and you worked with Sam Gambir. And since Sam was an old friend of mine, I'm always curious how he worked as a team leader, how he mentored people, and how large his group was, and how he could even manage this enormously large
Yeah,
research group.
yeah. I experienced Sam as a fantastic leader. I've worked with many leaders throughout my career, but Sam certainly stood out as a very caring people leader,
Mhm.
both big brain and big heart. Incredible visionary, incredibly successful, managing an extremely large group, not only clinical radiology, clinical nuclear medicine, but also an extremely large and successful research groups as well as his own companies. But he always was deeply connected to everyone in the team. I felt whenever I spoke with him or what care, asked for advice, there was always this very deep and caring part of him that I find remarkable when leading such a large team.
As you mentioned, Sam had a very keen entrepreneurial spirit. He was very good at fundraising too. He had a very convincing way to present his data or give presentations. Did you develop your entrepreneurial spirit a little bit via influence through the Stanford environment, but also through Sam Gambir personally? Or
Yeah,
how did that come about?
yeah.
Or did you always have that to begin with?
Maybe I always had it in me, but there weren't the role models available to me at the time when I was in Europe. Maybe that changed, but the big difference with what I experienced when I came to Stanford before academic research or academic success to me was always traditionally measured in output, like
Yeah.
publications, impact factor, things like that. When I came to Sam's group and the broader Stanford environment, the idea was always, what's the product? How can we bring this technology actually to patients? So is there IP there? How can we form a company maybe around this technology? Really that translational aspect all the way to the customer or consumer, I think that really I learned from Sam as a role model, but also the broader Stanford environment. And that really spoke to me and shaped my path.
So the overall Stanford environment was very obviously focused on translation into the marketplace.
Yeah.
And that must have done something with you or to you, because then after a few years, I think 4 years you were at
Yeah.
Stanford,
Pretty,
you then, or 3 years, and then you moved on to McKinsey.
yeah.
What prompted that move, which is kind of interesting because you come from the highest academic environment to a very well situated and established
Yeah.
consulting company.
Yeah.
So what prompted that?
Yeah, it's a great question, and sometimes these very large decisions, it seems a very large career move, right? They come almost from within, naturally, without thinking a lot. It was certainly Stanford shaped that decision in a way, as I felt in that environment. There's probably an opportunity to have bigger impact potentially than through individual patient care and research. And I don't discount these. These are the most rewarding activities we can do, actually caring for a patient. But I'm always naturally drawn to how can I maximize the impact I have. And I felt I needed to step out of practicing medicine and get into a platform where I eventually could reach thousands of patients, if not more. And that was what felt so exciting, going into a large life science or consulting firm with a large life sciences practice, where I could really, first of all, learn a lot, but also try to reach impact at a larger scale.
So I don't know the structure of McKinsey very well, but isn't the starting point that people who join the company get a portfolio of some sort and start analyzing companies? And was that the first time that you got in touch to analyze very carefully pharmaceutical companies? Was that kind of the beginning, or did you look at other companies too?
Yeah. Everyone, the way is always you can shape your own path within McKinsey. I chose a path within life sciences and then pharmaceutical, because that's the other driver probably I have intrinsically, is always learning something new. So pharmaceuticals was quite new to me in a way, how drug development work, how market access, how commercial assessments, all these things work. So I was eventually quite lucky to get into a group, development excellence. So we worked with multiple large pharmaceutical companies on several drug development programs, all the way sometimes from preclinical stage to filings, and with an aspect always, how can we accelerate programs, how can we design them better, shape them better, how can we, influence a portfolio in order to impact the or benefit the impact for patients. So in that group, I was in touch or worked closely with some asset teams at pharmaceutical companies, but also with the strategy teams at pharmaceutical companies, sometimes deep in CMC or regulatory teams. So it was a fantastic learning ground, learning from multiple programs across different stages and life cycles.
Did you have any experience in regulatory affairs before you started McKinsey, or was that all new?
That was all
That's a
new.
very
Yeah.
complicated and difficult expertise to gain. I know there are now some schools like USC where you can get a degree in regulatory. You can
Yeah.
actually get a PhD.
Yeah.
But that was not the case at that time.
Yeah.
I think.
No, I did not have any regulatory experience. That was certainly something among the many things I learned within McKinsey. I'm so grateful of learning from several programs, from feedback, and regulatory is quite an interesting one, certainly also for radiopharmaceuticals, because if regulatory often goes off precedence, but if you want to innovate and move a field forward, it's sometimes there is no precedence, and you have to shape a path forward together with regulators.
So it's actually called almost like regulatory sciences. So what I find interesting about this is that you had medical expertise through your training, and then you had your PhD knowledge as a scientist, and then you come to a consulting company, so you learn the setup and structure of companies, and then you also have to learn regulatory, which in your later life then, in terms of radiopharmaceutical companies, was essential, because
Yeah.
you can't do a company that wants to get to the market with radiopharmaceuticals.
Yeah,
Radiopharmaceuticals can't do it without
yeah,
regulatory competence.
yeah. That's maybe also one of the advice I would have for students or other MDs who look for. I certainly took, if you will, quite an approach where McKinsey works in teams, and I joined McKinsey as a board certified radiologist and started um, quite young in a team and had to learn all the things you mentioned in addition, also the consulting a toolkit. So sometimes taking a step back or moving a step down accelerates at the end everything. And I didn't do this, almost certainly not for a career plan in mind. It was so driven by interest, by motivated by a willingness to learn.
Yeah.
And if you then pair this with passion, out of a sudden you're really good at it, and maybe then things accelerate much faster than you had imagined before.
Were there times later on when you missed clinical work, where you had the feeling, oh, it would be nice now to do an intervention,
Yeah,
treat a patient, read a scan?
yeah. More so itching the fingers on doing intervention than reading a scan, but certainly there have been times. I was a passionate physician. I always loved caring for patients. I loved the interactions. I loved making patients better. That's not always the case, but if that happens, it's one of the most rewarding feelings. And certainly sometimes I miss that. I feel now much closer back to it again. As a chief medical officer, I speak not directly with our patients, but I speak with our investigators, with the site staff, the nurses, and that is very rewarding.
Yeah.
And I feel quite close again to the feeling of practicing, seeing also scans before and after treatment. It feels good at times to feel almost like a treating physician again.
So when did you first learn or hear about radiopharmaceutical therapies or theranostics?
Yeah.
That was probably still when Sam was around, I guess.
Yeah, that was when Sam was around. I mean, in the very early days in my life as practicing physician, one of the procedures we did as interventional radiologists were the yttrium 90 CERT procedures. So in liver cancer, that's non-targeted. That's a catheter-based approach, but that's probably the first experience with radiopharmaceuticals. Then at SAM, certainly a strong focus on the diagnostic, very innovative part. And then again, in my time at McKinsey, I had touch points with radiopharmaceuticals again.
So when you left McKinsey, you joined a radiopharmaceutical company, which was Race Bio. How did that happen? You were looking, or they were looking, or both were looking?
I wasn't looking. I was. Ken Song, the CEO, reached out, and I was not looking. I was very happy at McKinsey at that time, but I took the call, if you will, and was open to have a conversation. And in that conversation, all the puzzle pieces of my professional life so far came together, and I thought this is a fantastic role in a company where I can shape things. I was convinced offer therapy will work out, and it's been a very rewarding experience altogether.
And then you moved to Southern California, or you
I did
stayed?
not. No, I
You
stayed.
You stayed.
I did. I was very used to traveling from the days of consulting, so I traveled almost every week to San Diego or internationally to conferences and to my collaborators and investigators.
So
Yeah.
tell us a little bit about the pathway for Race Bio to get to a point where the company was ready to be sold by a major pharmaceutical company.
Yeah. I think a lot of things came together. I certainly can't claim credit for everything that happened before me. So the company certainly had a great vision of an alpha therapy in a space that gained traction with the approval of Pluvicto. But it was also, to be said, it wasn't before the high days. It wasn't yet as established. Right when I joined, actually, the company just took a down run. So it wasn't a set in stone successful path. I do think in a biotech company, speed and execution matters a lot. So I do think we just did certain things faster than others. We used the ability actually to image some of our binders early on. We created great value inflection with the GPC3 program that I led with the imaging data and some of the treatment data. we had that led to our IPO in conjunction with getting straight from a phase 1 into a phase 3 on the actinium SH202 program, together with a pipeline and together with a vertical integration and a manufacturing path in an innovative space. I do think all these things came together and led to that very successful year 2023 for the company.
So then after you left Race Bio, you moved to a company that has a different angle. That is more the therapeutic isotope angle, thus far in the beginning at least, with the creation of a lead generator. And without any doubt, meeting an enormous demand for making alpha treatments more available and in a fairly seamless way available. How did you connect with them, and what attracted you about this approach? It's again something that widened your portfolio because you come from ligands essentially to the isotope angle.
Yeah. So to your last question first, who connected us? It's actually Tom Hope, who you know well, and I worked with closely also on the GPC3 side through Race. Made me aware of this company and mentioned they were looking for a CMO, and I was very surprised because I haven't heard about Advanced Cell before, and I thought I knew almost everybody in the field by that time. It was such a small field, but I was very surprised, and it felt so attractive to have an alpha particle that they actually can produce with a very short half-life. Just driven by the science, the radiobiology of lead makes a lot of sense. So I was just drawn to see how I could potentially innovate with the novel isotope. It's certainly helpful that Advanced Cell has generator technology where we can produce lead that accelerates hugely my clinical programs and enables me to innovate in clinical trial design the way we do. So I'm very grateful for this opportunity, and I also see huge potential for the company.
So in the role as CMO, you are intimately involved in trial design, I guess execution of the trial, working with the clinical research organizations, and so what else can you do?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's an interesting question. The role of a CMO is defined very differently in different companies, and often as a leader, you can actually shape a role the way how you envision it. So at Advanced Cell, I see the role of I see myself as a very strategic CMO, similar to almost a chief product officer in a technology company in Silicon Valley. I'm certainly under me is everything regarding to the clinical development strategy, as well as the regulatory strategy, the execution of such, but also the medical affairs, the customer voice, and then also input into our portfolio strategy, input into our global strategy, and also in a small biotech, a large part of the fundraising is often directed towards clinical questions. So I was certainly involved heavily in the raising of our Series C.
So you mentioned the portfolio, and of course, now again, isotopes and there are ligands, and so what is Advanced Cell focusing on after or beyond the lead project?
So the way how we think about our pipeline is that we try to understand from a science and radiobiology perspective where may a lead asset have an advantage over standard of care or add to standard of care. I think in terms of where we do see the advantages of lead is certainly when we think about fast-growing aggressive cancers, a strategy of dosing more frequently than every 6 or 8 weeks, I think, is necessary. If you think of small cell lung cancer or pancreatic cancer, etc. And the other position where I see lead is in early lines in certain combination therapies. I think the immunogenic profile of lead lends itself as an option for certain combinations, be it, for example, with T-cell engagers, or other immune checkpoint inhibitors, for example, but also the lack of or only the few daughter isotopes for lead, one alpha only, I do think implies the potential for a improved toxicity profile that may enable a lead-based approach to go into early lines. in combination with other
So
therapies.
the strategy is actually to go deep rather than broad and really understand all the advantages that lead can offer, arrive at rational combination treatments, exploit the characteristics really to the finish line very carefully, and then see where it can be placed on the market. I think one advantage is also the availability then, because actinium problem is not solved yet, and as it pertains to PSMA, it's a very complicated toxicity profile, and I don't know whether that's sufficiently appreciated yet, but it is it is definitely not an early approach.
I would agree. The data is yet to be seen, but I would agree that I would see in the treatment landscape generally an actinium-based product eventually more in a later line versus other isotopes may be able to go into earlier lines. And yeah, about the supply chain, I think beyond lutetium, all the isotopes have yet to prove their commercial scalability, but certainly as a field and as sponsors and also pharmaceutical companies, I think that what we really need to understand is at the end, running a phase 3 trial may be a certain scale up, but a commercial scale is a different animal. And at the end of the day, the best drug is the drug that patients can get. So we will all need to strive forward and in a combined effort eventually to really ensure that these drugs at the end of the day will also be commercially available
So
in large indications such as prostate, breast, or whatever we will.
so the biggest task at Advanced Cell is really bring it to the market and establish the utility and show that it is superior for some indications. So now you are with Advanced Cell, and what's the future bringing for you?
You know, it when you look at my CV, it may almost look like I planned my career. I have never. I'm a person who generally is open and says yes and listens, but I'm not crafting my career step by step. I'm more drawn to what am I passionate about? Where can I have an impact? Where's my skills unique? And also where can I grow others under me? So I do think I don't have a specific plan. I currently love what I do at Advanced Cell, and I think I probably have 20 more years or more ahead of me in biotech and pharma. So I try to remain curious, try to remain supportive, try to maintain relationships, and generally I've learned that path led me naturally into something very.
What would your advice be for young clinician scientists or young scientists in an increasingly difficult environment that is not very friendly towards science?
Yeah.
That's maybe easier for physician than for basic scientists, or definitely easier. What would your recommendation for career choices would be? What would that be?
Yeah, that's a great question, and there's probably some individual aspect always involved if somebody would ask me. But in general, I would say perseverance is important, right? In wherever you are, the grass isn't always greener. It's always getting through something and finishing a certain step or a certain milestone or a certain degree or something. I do think is important. So don't make a career decision on the worst day or best day in your certain step, because you may end up switching and switching and switching. So I think perseverance, seeing it through, remaining positive, but also remaining open. I think don't think a career is linear. Sometimes the greatest careers are actually different, and often it's driven by being open, listening, really deeply experiencing, maybe say yes to experiences. Eventually good things will happen. I think that's probably the two main advices I would have. Also, I would say probably look out for great leaders. Often, one of my very early professors once said, "You don't choose a job, you choose a boss at the end of the day." So working with great leaders who truly have your interests, who want your best, who lift you up, who carry you through, where you can learn from that, inspire you, where you feel morally aligned, the values are aligned. I think that is probably something beyond a certain job to really watch out for when choosing or evaluating different career options.
I think that is great advice for our listeners and readers. And thank you very much for your time and for your insights. And I hope we can talk again soon.
Thank you so much. Bye.